Welcome back, welcome back. The 2003 best-selling novel by the Afghan-American writer Khalid Hosseini is now on the big screen. The Kite-Runner tells the story of a boy haunted by the guilt of betraying his childhood friend, having as the background 3 decades of Afghanistan's history, from before the Soviet invasion to the rise of the Taliban. This week, it was nominated for a Golden Globe Award. Even before its release, the film has made headlines. A controversial rape scene, homosexual rape scene, ended in the removal of the actors from Afghanistan and a delay of 6 weeks in the release of the film. Joining me today is the film's lead actor, Khalid Abdalla. But first, let's take a look at the film in which he stars, The Kite-Runner.
باید برم.
یک چیز دیگران باید ببینم.
Nothing that you remembered has survived. بهتر است که فراموش کنی.
دیگه نمیخوایم که فراموش کنم.
Khalid, welcome. And that scene, would that be one of the scenes that was shot in China?
Yes, that was shot in China.
For safety reasons, was that?
No, not so much for safety reasons. I mean, it was for 2 reasons really. The major one being that we needed somewhere that could be 1970s Kabul, which of course doesn't exist anymore, and then also safety reasons as well. But where we chose was about 4 or 5 hours drive. It was a Xinjiang province, about 4 or 5 hours drive from the border with Afghanistan and Pakistan. So very similar, both in landscape and also cultural influences. For the imagination, it's more Central Asia, which of course is what Afghanistan is, than how people generally think of China.
And the rape scene we were talking about there, which caused controversy, particularly possible danger to the young actors doing it, and your character thinks out of helping, as it were, but of course it's not you playing the scene at the time because it's too young, obviously.
Yes.
But just explain about that scene.
Well, it's a crucial scene in the story, in that it's the major act of betrayal that, as you said in your introduction, haunts Emir. What's happened is that there have been concerns raised that there might be adverse reactions in Afghanistan, which is something we don't know because we don't know whether or not that will happen. Personally, I'm very hopeful that it won't, and I judge that on the Afghans who've already seen the film and have reacted immensely positively to it. But because there's the possibility of there being adverse reactions, the boys have been taken out of Afghanistan to the UAE for the moment, so that if anything were to happen, we know that they're safe, because obviously they're very important to us. I first met them in Kabul, learnt to fly a kite with them, and spent 4 months on set every day with them. So clearly they're very important to us. But as I say, it's about the possibility of that happening rather than anything having happened so far. It's a sort of precautionary, preemptive measure.
And it's because of the scene and that sort of scene being particularly contrary to the closed nature of Afghan society, rather than that it will actually cause rebellion. The blame may be put on the actors. That was the...
Yes, that's the fear. It's the fear that might happen, and also because there's the scene takes place between a Pashto and a Hazara, and there are worries that maybe that fits into an ethnic tension. But as I say, Afghans who've seen the film everywhere.
That's doubly exciting.
Well, it's the first film, I think, in the history of Hollywood where the first point of contact, not just with Afghanistan, but that whole region, is a human family story and not political violence. It's the first time that's the prism of your contact. And of course, it's a region that's bedeviled and burdened by a whole host of negative stereotypes, which are what people associate with it before they associate anything positive.
You had to, you learned a new language, didn't you, for this film?
I did. It sounds totally ridiculous, doesn't it?
That's an epic thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, I spent a month in Afghanistan before we shot the film, And obviously I'm not Afghan originally, I'm British Egyptian. And part of the film, as you saw, is in Dari. And so knowing what it feels like, because again there's a sort of long history of it in film, where, you know, if you come from a foreign country, you're sort of treated as if it's irrelevant really how you speak, and you have that particularly that experience from the Middle East. I had no desire going into this film to be guilty of that myself.
Right.
So I spent a month in Afghanistan. I had 4 or 5 hours of Dari lessons a day and was in complete immersion, doing everything I could in terms of language, banishing English, but also travelling everywhere referenced in the book, eating everything referenced in the book, all up the north and the west of the country. And somehow at the end of that time I came out speaking Dari, which I never expected, but I like to think of it as a parting gift, but it had to happen.
It had to happen, and
Yeah.
you remembered it too.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I haven't managed to practice it as much since, but it's still there.
And in terms of playing kites, playing with kites, playing kite or whatever, why is it such a sort of symbol in an Afghan film? Why is it so important, as it were, and are you good at it?
I think there's a number of things. It's the Afghan national sport. I mean, one thing that stunned me, because I never quite expected it, I was there during the summer of 2006, and around 4 or 5 in the evening, just as it's getting cool, the sky is just filled with kites. It is an extraordinary sight. And I learnt to fly a kite in Kabul, and as an adult learning to fly a kite, I was entirely ridiculous to all these children that would congregate round me, because for them it was as normal as being able to throw a ball and catch one, you know. So who was this adult trying to learn to fly a kite? In relation to how it fits into the story, I think part of what it's about is it's a relationship between, you know, it's a relationship between these 2 best friends and the father, and sort of there's an inability to love properly between all 3 of them. And particularly with Amir and his relationship with his father, who seems to love his servant more than he loves his own son. And in the course of the story, this kite essentially begins to mean, to me anyway, it's a route through to love somehow between Amir and his father. But within Afghanistan, and the idea of the Kite-Runner, which is incredibly beautiful, these kite fights that they have, where the principle is you fight with the strings. You want to cut the other person's kite out of the sky. So actually you're using your kite to guide the string, and the faster it goes out, the better it cuts, and also you turn it round and round, which makes it more abrasive, like a Chinese burn. But once that kite is cut, it falls, and of course that becomes the trophy. So the boys run after it to get it. And the scene the rape scene that takes place is kind of an act of sacrifice, because Hassan recognises that somehow this kite might have a transformative effect on Amir's relationship with his father. Of course, it gets much more complicated than that.
Well, you've given us a marvellous picture of the film. I will resist saying "go fly a kite" or other such remarks, and instead say "go win a globe."
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Khalid.
Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Pleasure.
Fascinating. In a moment, the happiest story of 2007. That's our opinion, anyway. Find out whether you agree after this short break.